When chaos saved a life, the day everything went wrong. You won't believe what this crew did while Mom was gone, but their wild mess became a miracle. The 16-month-old toddler hurled a massive container of cornstarch across the living room, sending an avalanche of fine white powder billowing through the air like an indoor blizzard. When his Aunt Maria walked through the front door, exhausted from her nursing shift, and witnessed the destruction blanketing her carefully organized space, she felt her composure crack. She assumed it was just another episode of toddler mayhem, encouraged by his furry accomplices. She couldn't have been more wrong. As she moved closer to unleash her frustration, she spotted something horrifying hidden beneath the white coating. What she found buried in that sea of powder was so alarming it transformed everything she thought she knew about that chaotic afternoon. Before we continue, make sure to hit that subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up so you never miss another incredible story like this one. The days before that Thursday had been relentless. For Maria, taking care of her nephew while her sister recovered from surgery felt less like the heartwarming family bonding she'd imagined and more like navigating a disaster zone. Her sister's husband worked long hours at the hospital, leaving Maria alone with little Oscar, who's recently been nicknamed Hurricane Oscar, and a collection of pets that seemed to thrive on pandemonium. There was Captain Whiskers, a paranoid tabby cat who treated every shadow like an invading army. There was Lady Bella May, a golden-coated mixed breed whose gentle temperament usually made her the calm in any storm, but who'd been behaving strangely protective all week. And finally, Admiral Fluffington, the Persian cat, who observed the household drama from elevated perches with the cold calculation of a chess master. By Thursday evening, Maria was surviving on 4 hours of fractured sleep and endless cups of lukewarm tea. Her vision blurred at the edges, that particular kind of exhaustion that makes your skull feel too tight. Her movements had become mechanical as she folded laundry, the rustle of fabric oddly amplified in her overtired state. Oscar had been clingy since morning, gripping her pants and producing a persistent whimper that burrowed into her last nerve. The animals weren't helping. Captain Whiskers had been prowling near the sliding glass door, making anxious chirping sounds at the backyard, while Lady Bella May kept pressing her muzzle into Maria's palm, her amber eyes radiating a concern Maria couldn't interpret and was too drained to investigate. "I just need 10 minutes," Maria murmured to herself, her voice brittle with fatigue. 10 minutes to pick up groceries and clear my head. She created a secure play zone in the living room, but Oscar wailed the instant she approached the gate. Desperate and depleted, she made a calculation. Leave Oscar and the pets in the baby-proofed living area while she made a quick run to the corner store 2 blocks away. Her sister would be home from her doctor's appointment in 30 minutes. She triple-checked the locks. She verified the stove was off. She made sure the fireplace screen was secure. Everything seemed protected. As she grabbed her keys and stepped out the front door, she took a deep breath of cool air, feeling momentarily unburdened. For those brief minutes walking to the store, the weight lifted slightly. But peace in a house with a toddler and 3 animals is never guaranteed. It's fragile. The catastrophe happened while she was selecting bread in aisle 3. She didn't hear it, didn't sense it. She just felt an inexplicable tightness in her chest, a maternal instinct borrowed from her sister that made her abandon her shopping basket and rush home faster than she'd moved in months. When Maria burst through the front door, her grocery bag forgotten on the sidewalk, she expected to find Oscar crying or the pets fighting. Instead, she heard an eerie, guttural snarl, a sound she'd never heard from Lady Bella in all her years. The living room looked like a snow globe had detonated. The air hung thick with suspended particles, coating her throat with the taste of starch. Covering the hardwood, covering the furniture, covering absolutely everything was the entire contents of a 2-pound container of cornstarch from the kitchen counter. The plastic container lay cracked in pieces near the entertainment center, and positioned in the epicenter of this powdery apocalypse was the gang. Oscar sat covered head to toe in white, looking like a miniature abominable snowman, his eyes enormous and bewildered. Captain Whiskers was shaking his head violently, white clouds exploding from his whiskers. Admiral Fluffington perched on the bookshelf, glaring down with obvious contempt. Lady Bella stood frozen near the center of the chaos, her golden fur transformed into a ghostly white, muscles tensed like carved marble. The initial relief that everyone appeared physically intact immediately twisted into volcanic anger. The disaster was comprehensive. It coated the electronics. It filled the carpet fibers. It drifted through the air vents. Maria felt her legs weaken, not from fear, but from absolute crushing despair. The exhaustion she'd been fighting rushed over her like a tidal wave. This was her breaking point. "What happened here?" Maria shouted, her voice cracking with emotion. "What have you done?" She stepped into the living room, cornstarch crunching beneath her shoes like fresh snow. She glared at Oscar, who recoiled at her harsh tone. She directed her fury at the animals. "Bad! How could you make this mess? How could you destroy everything?" She moved toward the closet for cleaning supplies, her mind already calculating the hours of work ahead, the ruined furniture, the impossibility of removing cornstarch from pet fur and carpet padding. "Everyone out!" she commanded, gesturing toward the hallway. "Move! Now!" But they refused to budge. This was the moment when misunderstanding nearly became tragedy. Normally, a raised voice would send Captain Whiskers fleeing to the bedroom and Lady Bella lowering her head submissively. But today, they stood firm. Lady Bella released a deep, resonant bark, positioning herself between Maria and the sofa. Oscar, detecting the tension, began crying, extending his powder-covered arms toward his aunt. "I said move," Maria snapped, advancing to scoop up Oscar. She was so consumed by anger, so blinded by the monumental inconvenience, that she failed to notice what held the animal's attention. She reached for her nephew, her foot hovering above a suspicious mound of cornstarch near the base of the couch. Lady Bella lunged forward with a ferocious, terrifying snarl, teeth bared at Maria's ankle. Maria stumbled backward, shocked to her core. Lady Bella had never displayed aggression. "Bella!" Maria gasped, wounded and confused. "What's gotten into you?" She studied the dog's expression. Those eyes weren't focused on her. They were locked intensely on that particular innocent-looking pile of white powder near Maria's feet. Admiral Fluffington, typically indifferent, was hissing from his elevated position, his attention riveted to the same location. Captain Whiskers was trembling violently, his entire body rigid, pointing like a biological compass at the floor. Time crystallized. The particles suspended in the afternoon light streaming through the windows seemed to slow their descent. Maria's instincts, buried beneath layers of exhaustion and frustration, finally broke through the mental fog. The animals weren't misbehaving. They were protecting something, or someone. Maria looked down at the cornstarch pile the animals surrounded. Suddenly, the white coating shifted. Not from air movement, not from settling. The movement was fluid, purposeful, and absolutely terrifying. The cornstarch covered the brown hardwood completely, destroying the natural camouflage that evolution had perfected over countless generations. The white powder coated the intruder, exposing the unmistakable coiled pattern of a lethal predator, a snake. Not a harmless garter snake from the garden. As the creature moved, Irritated by the noise and the powder interfering with its heat-sensing organs, the S-curve revealed a substantial body and a distinctively shaped head, now stark white against the floor. It was a timber rattlesnake, a venomous pit viper, coiled less than 8 inches from where Maria's foot had been moments earlier. The realization struck Maria like a punch to the sternum. Air evacuated her lungs in a sharp, painful gasp. The mess hadn't been a toddler's tantrum. It hadn't been an accident. Oscar, or possibly the cats, had knocked the container down in a panic reaction. The disaster was the only reason she could see the danger. Without that white coating, the brown snake on brown flooring would have been completely invisible. Terror, ice cold and razor sharp, flooded her nervous system. "Oh God," she whispered, her hand covering her mouth. The snake coiled tighter, raising its head slightly. It was agitated, partially blinded by cornstarch, testing the air with its tongue. Lady Bella maintained her position, barking in measured intervals, keeping the snake's focus on her and away from the child. "Oscar," Maria choked out. He was barely 4 feet from the rattlesnake. Instinct, primal and overwhelming, seized control. Maria didn't think, she acted. Moving deliberately but smoothly, avoiding sudden movements, she grabbed a throw blanket from the nearby chair. With trembling hands, she tossed it toward the snake to momentarily obscure its vision. As the viper struck at the fabric with a sound like ripping paper, Maria lunged forward with her other arm, lifting Oscar from the floor in one fluid motion. She scrambled backward, her shoes sliding in the powder, crushing her nephew against her chest so firmly he began to protest. "Back, Bella, back!" she screamed, her voice shrill with hysteria. The animals, recognizing the child was secure, finally retreated, barking frantically as they backed into the hallway. Maria slammed the living room door shut, trapping the snake inside, and fumbled for her phone with violently shaking hands. She could barely press the numbers to dial 911. "Emergency services," she gasped when connected. "Timber rattlesnake! In my living room! My nephew! He was right there!" The following 30 minutes stretched into an eternity of fear. Maria huddled in the kitchen, clutching Oscar and the pets, straining to hear any sound from the living room. She felt nauseated with guilt. She had yelled at them. She had been ready to punish them. She had looked at the cornstarch and seen a problem, while they had looked at the floor and seen death. When the wildlife control specialist arrived with protective gear and snake handling equipment, Maria watched from the kitchen doorway, her heart hammering. She heard him whistle low with respect. "Ma'am," the specialist called moments later, "it's secured. You can look now." Maria approached on unsteady legs. The specialist had the snake contained in a reinforced container, but he was gesturing at the floor pattern. The cornstarch was disturbed in a chaotic, winding trail where the snake had thrashed. "You see this?" he asked gravely, pointing to where the snake had been positioned. "This is a timber rattlesnake. Their camouflage on hardwood is nearly perfect. In my 20 years doing this, I've seen people step on these because they blend so completely with flooring like yours." He examined the broken container and the blanket of white dust. "I don't know how this powder got everywhere," he said, shaking his head slowly. "But I can tell you without any doubt, if this floor hadn't been white, you or your nephew would have stepped on this rattlesnake. That cornstarch saved lives today." The specialist explained that the snake had likely entered through a damaged weather seal around the sliding door, the very spot Captain Whiskers had been fixating on all week. Lady Bella's clinginess had been her attempting to keep Maria away from the living room. The animals had sensed the danger. They had all known. And when the threat became immediate, Oscar, responding to the animals' panic, had grabbed and thrown the only thing within reach, the cornstarch container. It wasn't destruction. It was a desperate, uncoordinated, accidental miracle. Maria looked at the mess with new eyes. The cornstarch wasn't a disaster anymore. It was a warning system. It was a protective barrier.
It was the only reason she wasn't in an emergency room right now. Tears, hot and sudden, streamed down her face. She sank to the kitchen floor, covering her face with both hands. The relief was overwhelming, but the shame cut deeper. She had judged the situation with human arrogance, assuming chaos meant misbehavior. She had been so focused on the clean floor that she missed the predator concealed on it. That evening, after the specialist departed and the floors were carefully cleaned, a task Maria performed with trembling reverence, the entire atmosphere shifted. She prepared a feast for her protectors, premium canned tuna for Captain Whiskers and Admiral Fluffington, and a large portion of grilled chicken for Lady Bella. Oscar sat in her lap, drinking warm milk, blissfully unaware he was a hero. "I'm so sorry," Maria whispered into Lady Bella's soft fur. The dog's tail thumped against the floor, her tongue gently licking Maria's salty tears. "I'm so sorry," I yelled. "You were saving us." She looked at Captain Whiskers, contentedly eating his tuna. "You tried to warn me," she said softly. "You tried all week." The exhaustion remained, but the frustration had evaporated, replaced by profound, trembling gratitude. She understood now that the chaos she fought against daily, the scattered toys, the noise, the disorder, wasn't her enemy. It was life. And today, the chaos had been a shield. The great cornstarch incident of 2025 wasn't remembered as the day the living room was destroyed. It was remembered as the day a family survived because of a clumsy toddler and 3 animals whose wisdom their caretaker had dismissed. Maria realized her role as protector had been reversed. She was the one being protected. Sometimes, the barrier between safety and tragedy is guarded not by technology or planning, but by the instinctive chaos of those who love us most. What we perceive as disaster is often a diversion, a warning, or a blessing wrapped in mess. Instinct speaks louder than logic when danger hides in plain sight, and sometimes you need to make a mess to reveal the truth. If this story moved you or opened your eyes to the incredible instincts of our animal companions, don't forget to hit that like button, drop your thoughts in the comments below, and subscribe for more powerful true stories. Share this with your friends and family, because sometimes the thing that makes you angry is exactly what saves your life.